Haynie Gourley, one of Nashville's most successful businessmen, had been shot and killed in a carjacking not far from his Chevy showroom. His partner and protege Bill Powell was behind the wheel and telling a story that didn't add up.
Well, there were no clues. Bill Powell said he had made a U-turn just after Spence Lane, and then he sort of changed it later.
Powell said a black man had leaped into the back seat of the Chevy Caprice, but the shots had come from the driver's side. There was no robbery. Mr. Gourley's glasses and wallet were still in the back seat.
Actually, I had two $100 bills in there.
Police were on the hunt for a black man. Powell looked at a lineup and positively identified a man.
A person that turned out to be in the state of California when this happened. He just seized that opportunity to accuse someone that he was going to help put in prison for the rest of his life.
People initially believed Bill Powell's story. When things started breaking down, cracks in his story began to appear.
10 months after the crime, Bill Powell would be indicted for the murder of Haynie Gourley, and the stage was set for Nashville's biggest trial in memory.
And man, as you're going to learn today, what a trial it was.
To this day, lawyers are studying the strategies of the attorneys involved. The cast of characters like a legal Mount Rushmore. Jack Norman Sr. and Cecil Branstetter for the defense. Tom Shriver and the great orator John J. Hooker Sr. for the prosecution.
The Powell trial in 1969 was the most sensational trial Nashville had seen up until that time.
People were lined up at 6 a.m. in the morning to try to get into the courtroom, and they had to turn them away because there were only 64 seats. It was very tense inside the courtroom, but it was crazy out in the hall with all these people, the cameras milling about. And back then they had those huge cameras. The TV people were milling about on the plaza there. And it was so popular, and that both daily newspapers printed every word of the transcript each day so that people could follow it.
When the trial began, there were two distinct camps in town, those who believed Powell and those who sided with the Gourleys. They hadn't found a weapon, and Powell had misidentified a suspect.
Here I was, just a young 24-year-old kid, but I had eyes and ears, and I could see and hear what was going on. You know, a term that's used now, I think that goes back, is gaslighting. Webster's dictionary says gaslighting is manipulating a credulous audience to the point where they don't believe the evidence in front of their eyes. And that's what happened.
On the third day of testimony, the prosecution scored points.
There was a surprise witness who had been at the grand jury. He had been at the Crystal getting coffee, and he looked to his left, and there's some railroad tracks there, and he saw Mr. Gourley and Bill Powell.
But he never saw carjacking or commotion, and never saw the Gourley car speeding back to Capital Chevrolet. There was testimony about the man Powell chose out of a lineup.
This is positively the person. I'll never forget his eyes. Well, as I said earlier, this person wasn't even in the city when my father was murdered.
But Powell's defense team of Norman and Branstetter could tangle any story into knots.
The witness would testify, and then Branstetter and Norman would bring up things that did not have anything to do with that testimony. So by the time the witness stepped down, the testimony was lost. was lost.
It was just night and day. It was total skill of destroying one witness and building another one up.
There still wasn't much physical evidence. No gun had been found, yet. And another clue cast doubt on Powell's carjack tale.
There were some men from one of the TV stations, and they had driven on down Elm Hill Pike and parked under some trees. And they found glass that looked like it had come from a car 3/4 of a mile past Spence Lane. Not where Bill Powell had originally said he made the U-turn right at Spence Lane. In the second week of the trial, all of a sudden there was a recess, and the prosecution introduced their next witness, and this very slim black man with a white shirt and black pants and some glasses in his pocket got on the stand, and everybody was saying, "Who is this?"
His name was Walter Lee Davis, a dynamite worker blasting to lay some pipe at a new Kroger warehouse.
He was eating a couple of sandwiches his wife had fixed for him that morning, and he looked over and saw a black Chevrolet park on the side of the road, pull up under some trees, 3 trees, and he saw two men get out of the car, and they went to the back of the car and they were gesturing, and then they got back in the car, and about 3 minutes passed, and the big man who was driving, the taller man, got back out of the driver's seat and went around to the other side and got in the back seat. And then he heard 4 shots. The 4th one was very loud. And then he saw the tall man come around. He had opened the trunk, gotten something out of the trunk, and he closed the trunk. He got back in the driver's seat.
He had what turned out to be a perfect view at Massman Drive and Elm Hill Pike.
This gave Walter Lee Davis the chance to see the man who was in the passenger seat. And he said he was slumped over, and as he was on the witness stand, he said he was like this. And then the car just sped off back toward town.
And that would be consistent for where the glass was found.
Exactly. Cecil Branstetter, Powell's defense lawyer, got hold of him, and it must have been 2 or 3 hours, went over and over and just got him so, he said, "Can you see, can you hear anything? You were in the penitentiary." It turns out he said, "Yes, sir, that was me in the penitentiary." And but Cecil Branstetter didn't ask him for what, but I wrote a bad check. And he said, "Well, how much was that check for?" And he said, it was for $21, best I recall.
In the cross-examination confusion, the Walter Davis bombshell had fizzled. But there would soon be another surprise.
In late August, after Mr. Gourley was killed, there was a man driving a front loader and up on Elm Hill Pike, but very near Capitol Chevrolet. He was looking for bottles. He always looked for bottles for his son to exchange for pennies, or nickels. He started just walking a little bit toward the railroad tracks there, and he saw something white sticking up. And he got closer and saw it was a gun.